Welcome back to another video. I'm still on hiatus, just want to say that. So I will not be regularly uploading. I'm kind of uploading whenever I want because I do feel as though in my last few videos, I've been doing quite stressful or like mentally taxing videos for me, so I just kind of want to upload at my own leisure. It is giving me a significant amount of anxiety along with my other problems. So yeah, that's the first thing I will open with. The second thing I want to open with is a little bit of a petty statement. So for those of you who aren't about that, you can skip through. But I feel like a lot of people don't know how to give an apology. Maybe this is a little bit off topic, but I feel as though there are people in this world who just don't know how to give an apology. Let's say, for instance, there's a person who bullies a young child online. Let's just, as a hypothetical, it's clearly not a hypothetical, but let's say it's a hypothetical. If you don't apologize to the child that you bullied, have you apologized? And what are you apologizing for? That your audience had to see you as a terrible person? Because there's not much of an apology, like, it bothers me that people are so willing to see certain people in a certain light, and it's been observed in psychology. It's called the halo effect, where if you like somebody, be it because they're attractive or you like a specific aspect of that person, you will continually adopt attributes that they have to present them in a positive light. I mean, to take it to the nth degree, this has happened with serial killers who people have deemed look attractive. And there will be women or men writing to them and professing that they couldn't have done all of these murders because they look so attractive and they're such a nice person. Stop that. Hold the people you love accountable. Anyway, I have my, not really script, but my notes that I will be referencing. And today we are going to be talking about selective humanism and performative activism. This is something that I've briefly touched on before. Sorry, this is like a new hairstyle that I'm working through and I'm not sure I like it yet. But selective humanism and performative activism is something that I have spoken about before in brief terms on Twitter, and I would like to talk about it in a bit more depth. The last couple of videos that I have done, I'm going to put in a playlist called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Ex-Muslim Community, because I think it's important to point out things that I've experienced over this last year being in this community. And to reiterate, and I will reiterate this in every single video, the ex-Muslim community is in fact a community. I will hear other points of view, but there aren't like qualifiers for a community. If there is a label that a group of people are identifying with and find each other with, that creates a community. Dysfunctional, functional, it's a community. In the last video, we talked about trauma bonding and tribalism, and it's been 2 weeks since that video, and I, like, all of the stuff that I do, I bring up in therapy quite frequently, because I take all of this very seriously. I take my activism very seriously. I take my videos most of the time quite seriously, and everything I do, I take seriously, which maybe I shouldn't take as seriously. But we talked about trauma bonding and tribalism in the ex-Muslim community, so if you would like to hear about that, please do feel free to. And the video before that, we spoke about safeguarding. Today, we're going to be talking about selective humanism. And I am sorry to say, because I know a lot of people are sick of hearing it, but we will be bringing up the BLM topic again because it is the most recent example that I can use. I also want to highlight how the lack of criticism within our community has led to certain ideas and certain people rising to prominence, despite the fact that they are very selective in their humanism. So the first thing I want to touch on, the very first thing, is criticism and why it's important. criticism, and I've said this on so many occasions in terms of other stuff, is important to do for the things that you care about. If you, for example, one of the reasons why it is so important to criticize religion and solid scripture is because such ideas cannot progress without criticism. If you cannot criticize the things that you love, they will not improve. They will just remain as they are. And this community, the ex-Muslim community, is something that I value, it's something that I believe in, it's something that I am a part of, and I want for it to be better. That's it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that people in the community are incapable of change. I'm not even saying that there are people in this community that you should absolutely not follow, although there are people that I don't follow. All I'm saying is that there are things that I have seen in this community that I think garners criticism and I think should be improved. And this is just my personal opinion. Things that you love deserve criticism. It's the way that we all improve. As someone who is an artist, as someone who is a writer, as someone who does stuff that people criticize quite frequently, it is important to me that you give me criticism so that I can improve the work that I do. If all you give me is praise, then my work will never change. I will never grow. This community, as it becomes larger, needs to grow in a positive, progressive, and just not a very toxic direction. And thus far, the things that I've talked about in terms of safeguarding, in terms of tribalism and trauma bonding, in terms of today's topic, selective humanism and performative activism, these are things that I think need to change, be it slightly or drastically. And if my voice adds to that change, then that is something that I think is valuable. So there are certain things that I think in this community are kind of popular ideas. And those ideas are being used as avenues to prop us. And this is why it's really, really important to disassociate. The ways I've written my notes is really just not good. There are certain people and certain ideas which prop our voices, and those ideas and people aren't necessarily very good. So in my opinion, we should try to disassociate from those ideas as much as possible. And some headway has been made in that, in terms of the Hindutva or the Hindu nationalists and far right-wing people who use our voices to prop their narrative. However, there are people that sort of continue to use it, and we as a community don't seem to be too against them using our voices for their purposes. And I'm talking about people who are known bigots like Robert Spencer and really conservative Christians. What I noticed when I first started doing ex-Muslim content is that a lot of conservative Christians would jump onto promoting me, and I would have a lot of conservative Christian followers until I said something very anti-Christian, or anti-Christianity rather, and then they would all leave. My focus with this channel and being an online personality, I'm not trying to make the ex-Muslim label the only thing that I talk about. I would like to branch out into other areas, just general vlogging, into my artwork, into my writing. I am someone who, you know, I consider myself a creative person, and that's the avenue that I want to go to, and I do not want an audience which is filled with racists, bigots, and conservatives, because I'm none of those things. At least I'm not. I do my best to disassociate from those ideas. On a political spectrum, I'm extremely liberal. I don't think that religion is the most important thing in the world. I find it vastly interesting. In fact, there are a couple of video ideas that I have that revolve around storytelling in religion. but I feel as though I'm always sort of pigeonholed with these people. Like up until I sort of cleared out the people that I was following in the last 2 weeks, I constantly saw bigoted things coming up in my feed, conservative ideas popping up in my feed, you know, people propping up people like Robert Spencer. And I really just didn't appreciate it. I do, however, appreciate people actively saying that they do not support right-wing conservatism, they do not support Hindu nationalists, bigotry, all of those things. And I try to do that as much as I can. Another thing that I think that people are a little shaky on is anti-Muslim bigotry. Unfortunately, we see a lot of that in our community, and I have tried to denounce it as best as I can on my channel and on my platforms. And I would like to say that Muslims are just people like you and me. Not every single Muslim takes their religion as seriously as some crazy nut jobs in the East, like ISIS and all of that stuff. There are people who just sort of keep it personal to themselves. And I think that the anti-theist narrative in the ex-Muslim community is also extremely popular, and it's not one I agree with. I don't agree with anti-theism, because I think it's just really unrealistic and unreasonable to think that religion will just disappear one day and you can be catalyst for that. And secondly, because as much as I hate to admit it, there are people who would be worse off without religion. And my father was pretty bad, but if he did not have religion, he would be 1,000 times worse. And on the other side of the coin, my mother, who died of cancer, religion was something that she really held to give her some peace before she died. Religion is ultimately just the blanket that we all hold to keep us warm at night, so we don't have to constantly think about the existential dread of dying and there being nothing left. And anti-theism is just something that I can't agree with. I think that everyone is entitled to believe what they want to believe. I have no intention of eradicating religion. I'm just here to talk about my experiences with religion and also talk about the slightly more interesting and weird parts of it. Like, that's all I want to do. But obviously that's all my opinion. Like, all of this is just my opinion and my experience. So some examples that I wanted to go through, and the main case study that I want to use is the BLM movement, because again, it was the most recent one, where I felt as though a lot of prominent figures in the ex-Muslim community sort of divulged in their opinions. The first thing that I want to say is that racism is not a political issue. It is a human rights issue, and it should be treated as such. If people are judged differently based on their race, treated differently based on their race, it is no longer just a political issue, it is a human rights issue. And this is something that I tried to express in all the videos that I made around BLM, and it's still something that I support. I do not support the original organization, which a lot of people criticize me for, even though I've never said that. A lot of people also called me a communist. I am very much a centrist, which is annoying to a lot of people, but I'm a liberal. I'm not a socialist at all. And like, I don't even know what else to say about that. I don't know why I'm defending myself anyway, because it to me and to a few others who are who are a bit young in the ex-Muslim community, it seemed a little strange that some of our prominent speakers in the ex-Muslim community just either weren't talking about BLM or were holding a very conservative view on the whole matter. And my perception is that if you are in the middle of this civil rights movement, if you are focusing more on buildings than you are people, then I don't know how you can call yourself a humanist. I just don't. Yes, there is explicit racism in other parts of the world. Yes, there are obvious racisms going over all parts of the world, but implicit racism cannot be ignored. And it really, really felt like this issue was being ignored. When I was debating this issue with other ex-Muslims in the community, there were these ideas that privilege was not a thing, when sociologically it is a thing. There was also this idea that police brutality just doesn't happen and police are just doing their jobs, when this is just not the case, especially in the United States. There have been, not just in terms of colored people or minorities or black people, but almost every echelon of society is aware of police brutality being a thing. And it really, really struck me as something so not okay. The things that I have heard and I continue to hear whenever I bring up the BLM movement is that it's not an ex-Muslim issue, that what has BLM done for us, and also the idea that you don't have to be anti-racist. I'm sorry, but if you call yourself a humanism but do not talk about humanist issues, then your humanism is extremely selective. If you call yourself an activist for human rights, but you do not talk about one of the biggest civil unrests this year, then I really have to question your humanism. It does not matter if it's an ex-Muslim issue. A lot of things that we support from the feminist movement, like the Me Too movement and all kinds of things, I don't think there would be many of us that would disagree with that. I think that we would probably prop that and support that and share those posts. And I'm not saying that in the middle of that unrest that you had to go out and protest, even just sharing petitions and stuff. But ultimately, those movements are not ex-Muslim issues. They don't have to be ex-Muslim issues for you to share and talk about. It was such a big thing that people were not talking about, and when we asked them why they were not talking about them, we got the response that it is not an ex-Muslim issue, and I find that extremely selfish. And not only that, the comment, what has BLM done for us? What have a lot of movements done for us? I personally do not think that we should and have to operate on a basis of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It does not have to be transactionary. If you fight for human rights and you are an activist and you call yourself a humanist, you don't need to be owed something to be able to fight for something. And I am not saying by any stretch that you had to support BLM as an organization, because I personally don't do that. What I do support is that implicit racism needs to stop. Systematic oppression by our governments that have been observed, like it's not questionable, it's observable within the United States as well as in the UK. We should do away with that. That's it. That is all that needed to be said, and instead we saw these really just tasteless comments saying that this is not an ex-Muslim issue, so I don't think it's important, or like, what has this movement done for us? And I think it's particularly important for us to become more aware of these issues, because, and maybe this is just me, but from the community that I come from the Bengali community, our community is so virulently racist sometimes that there was a lot of education that I needed to go through to understand the struggle that someone who was darker than me would go through. And that extends to other parts. It extends to other things. Like when we talk about performative activism, I'm talking about that ex-Muslim that only talks about animal rights around Eid. Like never ever even posts anything about animal rights until Eid rolls around, because Eid is where Muslims slaughter animals. As if, you know, Muslims are the only ones that do that for anything. Or when talking about BLM, only caring about racism when it involves Muhammad saying something, the Prophet Muhammad saying something, or bullying children but supporting transphobes because of a petty rivalry or a petty disagreement. It really, really bothers me that people will not acknowledge when they've done something that maybe they shouldn't have done, and instead defend their tasteless action. It truly bothers me. And it is something that I think needs to be talked about. And maybe you don't agree with me in anything that I've said here, and that's fine. But it needs to be talked about. That was my point. And in light of this, I do want to... I've written out a list of people that I want to read out, and I think everyone should follow based on just the principles that they represent. I'm not going to be listing a bunch of people that I will not support, just because I think that I just don't want to do that. But these are the people that I will recommend. I'll start off with ex-Muslims. I recommend Maryam Namazi, Ali Rizvi, Abdullah Samir, Reason on Faith or Suhail Ahmed, Saf.com or the Amber Journals, Sophia Azadi and Alia Salim. In terms of activists that I would recommend that aren't necessarily ex-Muslim, I would recommend Geeta Sagal, Masih Ali Najad, I always mispronounce her name, Nazmiya Oral, Taslima Nasreen, Mona El-Tahawi, Khadija Khan, Betty Lakhkar, Dia Khan, Lilith Khanum, Nemat Sadat, Soma Razak, or Saima Razak. She's a LGBT Muslim that I would recommend. Jenny Wenhammer, Rana Ahmed, and Ina Shevchenko. Sorry if I mispronounce anyone's names, but I will link all of their Twitter handles in the description below. And I would highly recommend that you follow them. I deeply respect all of their work. And to conclude, criticism is a good thing. Criticism is not something that we should shy away from. If you have something to say, say it. If you have anything to say to me, to criticize me, say it. I may not necessarily agree with what you have to say, but I will take it on. Criticism is necessary for growth. Criticism is necessary for change, and it's the only way that we're going to garner a community that will want allies, you know, that allies will want to support. And all of this, like when talking about tribalism and trauma bonding and stuff like that, the reason why I found it particularly difficult to make these videos is because I know that maybe loads of people won't agree with me, and that's difficult for me. I feel like it's difficult for most people, and I can only imagine what people would feel like if they saw that these people that you look up to, these prominent figures in the ex-Muslim community, not addressing these issues, and instead taking a very conservative stance. Like it makes me wonder what I've let slide in this community, what statements have been made that I have then either defended or just turned a blind eye to. And I don't want that. Like I want to carry a label that I support, that I will be proud to support. And I also want representatives in that community to be someone that represents me or represents our community as a whole, and you know, someone that we can actually be proud of. That is kind of the conclusion of this video. In upcoming discussions, we are going to talk about mental health awareness, inflammation for the sake of inflammation, and toxic masculinity or safe sex awareness in the ex-Muslim community specifically. There are a few things that I am currently working on. I'm currently continuing to work on a comic book, so look out for that in future. And I also would like to start a Discord for new ex-Muslims so that we can have a safe space to talk and chat and share our experiences without maybe the full scope of Twitter bearing down on us. So please do let me know if that is something that you want, what you would recommend in terms of that. If there are any further topics that you would like to have me cover in this regard, please also let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. I do not know when the next one will be, but it will probably be around the similar or same issue. Thank you so much, and please do remember to follow everyone that I've linked in the description below. Thank you, and goodbye.